issue of taxation on the African continent is the fact that we don't collect enough taxes. Our tax to GDP ratio in many countries is low, is below 15%, which the international monetary authorities like the IMF consider to be at least a good average. But we have some countries, South Africa, Kenya, that do better and above 20%. So we do have some good examples. But the issue is, if we are to finance more and more of our own development, we need to collect more taxes. We need to increase our revenue effort on the continent. So how do we do that? And this is where the issue of what is the role of the private sector and of companies that work on the continent. How do we make sure that they pay their fair share and do not avoid taxes and behave responsibly? So I'm a member of what is called the B Team, which is a group of private sector companies who want to do business responsibly wherever they are, including on the African continent. The second issue on the continent is that of a lot of informal sector business. In many countries, the vast percentage or proportion of business is done by small and medium-sized and even micro businesses that are outside the tax net. So a lot of the discussion is, how do you bring them in? But we first have to recognize that many of these businesses feel they don't really get any benefits from government. Many times they don't have electricity, they don't have water, the transportation and logistics is not good enough, and then you want them to pay tax. So the key issue is, how do we marry good services to these companies and good incentives to their ability to pay tax? And there are various ways governments can do this. They can improve services to these companies, make it easier for them to register so they don't have to pay costs when they are registering. Cluster them in industrial areas so that they can get access in a cheaper fashion to electricity, water, and any of the logistics they need. And then maybe give them a period of time, 5 years, 7 years, whatever, to adjust before you actually bring them into the tax net. So we need to see what are the carrots, what are the sticks we have to apply to companies.
All right, you've touched on responsible tax, and this brought my attention to B Team responsible tax principles. So could you elaborate more on these principles?
Well, I mentioned some of the principles, the issue, and they're really thought through, and they're still taking comments from civil society, from government, from others. Some of these principles, like I said, are accountability and good governance. They pledge to conduct business and pay your taxes in an accountable manner, and to run your business in a well-governed manner so you obey the tax laws of the countries you're working in. Another principle is that of business structure. The pledge to structure your business in such a way that it doesn't look like you're trying to hide from paying taxes. That the structure is such that where you make your profits, it's clear, and you can also pay taxes in that jurisdiction. The principle of compliance, so you comply with the laws of the country. Effective support to administrating these taxes. Companies are also looking at that principle. How do we help support and strengthen tax administration so it can collect the taxes? Principle of transparency. How do we make sure we ourselves are more transparent? And that we even encourage small businesses along our value chain to also register and comply and pay taxes. These are some of the important principles.
Very interesting. Now, many African countries are aspiring to win themselves of foreign aid. So do you see this happening, and how does taxation come into play in this regard?
The issue of foreign aid is a two-way street. First of all, aid is diminishing generally to the continent. And at the same time, countries want to be more responsible. I think there are about 18 countries on the African continent whose aid to the ratio of aid to their public expenditure is about 40%. So they are known as aid dependent. The rest of the countries have a much smaller share. So these countries are also all trying to raise more domestic revenues so that they can pay more for their own development. So I think the handwriting is on the wall, and every government realizes that they have to stand more and more on their own feet. And the financing of the sustainable development goals and the green growth objectives that have been agreed on globally, all this requires more money. So every government is asking themselves, how can we raise more revenues so we can take on financing sustainable infrastructure, for instance, and all the other needs in health and education that we have.
Now we are speaking of responsible taxation, but this won't be effective unless there is responsible spending as well. So could you help us understand the nexus between the two and how they should be harmonized for effective public finance?
That is an excellent question. One of the reasons on the continent that people are not so eager to pay taxes is because there's a lack of trust. They don't believe that government is going to spend this money wisely. They believe that corruption will come in and a lot of the taxes will disappear into corrupt means of appropriation, misappropriation of the resources, or they will be spent inefficiently. So in order to encourage businesses, citizens, small businesses to pay taxes, government also has to demonstrate that these monies are going to be used effectively to provide services to the people. So there's a very, very strong nexus between responsible taxation and responsible spending. If your businesses and your citizens believe that they are not going to see any benefits from paying taxes, where would they pay? Of course they will not pay. So it is incumbent on government to demonstrate good use of these resources, and then it's incumbent on citizens and businesses to comply and to pay.